You're listening to Project Palladium. This is a podcast brought to you by high school students who are interested in gaining a deeper understanding of the world around them.
As usual, 5 a.m. came, our counselor woke us up, and at that point everyone's still groggy because it's quite early in the morning just as the sun's coming up, and everyone is trying to find space in the boat because we're jam-packed like sardines in a can together.
Harrison Peluso, my classmate, will be sharing his story from his time at Outward Bound, Hurricane Island. The trip consisted of 2 straight weeks on a singular boat with 11 other people, and it was grueling both mentally and physically.
After the group meeting, we set off for sail. In the morning, the wind was pretty consistent, so we were able to get a few miles in. At some point, the fog began consuming us. The mist sort of just took over in a very short amount of time. We lost visibility. We couldn't see the land masses ahead of us, so we had to begin relying on new navigational techniques to try and pinpoint where we were on the maps that we had. And then from there, we ended up losing the wind we had, so the wind was actually pushing against us. So to combat that, we set up our oars and we started rowing. And it's 4 men at a time, so we usually do like 20, 30-minute shifts where we'd switch in and out just to give people a rest. And then from there, the waves started picking up. They were getting a little bit rockier. You'd hear the waves crash against the side of the boat. And then we had to put on our rain gear. So if you've ever seen these intense fishing shows like Wicked Tuna, these fishermen are always wearing these large yellow or orange get-ups that are like extremely thick, protective. They're very warm, but they're very heavy also. So we put those on, and that made the rowing more difficult because we had to slug around extra weight on us, and our motion was a little bit restricted just from the material. The waves started getting bigger and bigger throughout the day, so they'd crash over the sides of the boat. A lot of kids were getting seasick. Every shift, there would be less and less people to swap out. You have to keep in time with everyone else so that everyone's pulling at the same time and you're not swaying in one direction. But at the same time, you have to try and watch the water, like monotonous and dulling on the mind because it's just repetitive. And it's the same thing over and over, and you sort of start to...
One by one, the faces drifted past him like the waves splashing against the oars. And then, like being caught in a riptide, Harrison was pulled back into the reality of life as a distinct figure crashed into his periphery. Sheena, someone different. Sheena was from Detroit, Michigan, and like Harrison, she also received the scholarship to the Outward Bound program. Sheena, a girl who has a butterfly tattoo, always wanted to break out of her own cocoon. Her initial swim test took place in the vast Maine Ocean. As the other campers were able to glide through the water seamlessly and enjoy the water, Sheena was struggling to stay afloat. With no knowledge of swimming and no experience, she had to use a life vest to complete the examination. As an inner-city girl, she had no experience on a boat or in the wild. Sheena purposely picked this specific Outward Bound program because she wanted to challenge herself. Sheena would quickly learn that swimming would not be the toughest part of being on the boat. Her seasickness would take hostage of her day-to-day life on deck and severely limited her ability to work with fellow crewmates.
Although she was one of the first people to get seasick, she would help out the group as much as possible by just getting in whenever another person was seasick. And you can tell that although her face looks nauseous, she's putting as much effort as she can into every stroke. But then after a couple minutes, she becomes more and more nauseous and she starts throwing up over the side. So it's where she'd have to just rest and eat some food and try and recuperate. After all that, she'd be right back up in the action, helping people navigate and learning different techniques in the boat to sail properly.
As the rowing shift ended and people were moving in and out again, another person that caught Harrison's eye was Nick. Nick, a cool guy from Massachusetts, well, a cool guy in his own words. At the time, he was a rising junior, and he was all about the party life. He would talk about smoking weed, drinking, and he had plenty of stories about him and his girlfriend. Nick was a smooth talker, and he was able to befriend everyone on the boat, but he didn't establish any substantial relationships. When there was a task to be done, he would strike up a conversation or take a leadership role by directing and ordering the fellow crew members to do all the hard labor. And over the course of the trip, the leadership started to fade away. However, he did provide entertainment to the boat with his stories about himself and his quote-unquote epic life.
When he would get in, the first couple moments, he'd just go off with so much power and row with so much effort. He was a person with a short attention span and someone who got tempered easily, so there were a couple occasions where if you did try and call him out for his shenanigans, he would just explode and start bringing up things that didn't really apply to the situation and try and shift the narrative. The coming of age moment was towards the end of the trip. We were having a conversation, and he said at home he'd never really been focused in school, and although ashamed, he had like a 1.7 GPA through his first 2 years of high school. He explained to me how he wanted to become better and more responsible and live with more integrity in his life on the boat and afterwards once he got back to Boston. He said he just wanted to become more committed in his academics and become more committed in his relationship with his girlfriend, just to grow as a person.
Finally, they were able to turn to an inlet on the island, and this protected them from the wind.
So that was a sense of relief just in that. Probably about after another half hour, we were able to finally find a place where we could dock. So we marked our position where we were and we cast our anchor. And then the cooks for that day prepared a really nice meal. It was like a tuna fish salad sandwich almost type of thing. So I don't think I've had a better one in my life. It was like a nice, thick
An experience like this always
tuna
changes
salad
someone.
with, like,
Spending time away from
mayo,
technology,
some
family,
lettuce.
and friends for 2 weeks can be very challenging. The people around Harrison also changed. When I asked him if he changed, he offered to read the poem he had written about the program.
And just like a forge master, Outward Bound leaves a unique emblem on its product, whether in the form of a tattoo or a renaissance of the soul. At birth, we are born anew, like the majestic sword fitted with the finest materials, a supple leather handle, and blades as sharp as few, stamped with a unique mark, one of a king's seal. Edges so defined, details so precise. We are ready to take on the world. As winter passes and spring arrives, the battles are not meant to keep us pearled. Instead, you leave each day with more chips and bruises. The soul, mind, and body are all worn like a pair of old boots. The path is not butter smooth, and the sheen loses its glimmer. For a multitude of reasons, people reach Outward Bound. The voyage is a different challenge from the routine, but change forces growth and rebirth. Outward Bound is the forge master that resharpens our spirits, happiness, strength, and self-understanding, so that we return to the world as new blades, worthy to be wielded by the finest kings.
Thank you for listening to Project Palladium. This show is brought to you by Element Project of Chaminade High School, located in Mineola, New York. This show is hosted and produced by Ronald Jabouin. Advised by Chow S. Liu. Special thanks to Harrison Peluso for sharing his story.